friends with Dorothy, fighting for your civil rights. Out on the cruel streets tonight. For Sylvia and Marcia, life was harder than you'll ever know. Still they placed a star where others just threw a stone. Ignited, 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 yeah.
I'm joined today by our very good friend Eamonn Reddington, and Eamonn is the director at TheSwitchboard. So Eamonn, welcome to LGBTQ Plus Life.
Thank you very much, Mick. It's lovely to be here.
Yeah. Eamonn, over many years I've known about an organisation called the Gay Switchboard. I gather you've changed your name, but before we even talk about that, I believe the organisation originally, or the service was originally set up almost 50 years ago. That takes us back to, 1974. I'm old enough to remember 1974, and it was very much an LGBT desert just about in Dublin then, was it not?
A black hole, an LGBT black hole, I think. I think it was originally conceived of in 1973 at a meeting in Trinity College of the LGBT, the gay rights movement at the time, and they launched it in 1974 as Telefriend, or it was called Telefriend, I think, until 1989. And I think in 1989 the name changed to Gay Switchboard Dublin, and in 2016, I think, it was changed to Gay Switchboard Ireland, and that was really the history up until last year. During COVID, it was very difficult, obviously, for all of us. But the Switchboard, we basically almost closed down in October of last year, just due to lack of funding, and volunteer, numbers had dropped, and we weren't really getting as many calls as, we used to. Calls were declining. So we basically decided that if we were going to continue, that we would have to really find, our demographic and kind of change the way we did things. So that was the idea. And so we rebranded to the Switchboard, because I think people had thought of it just as an organization for gay men. But after we changed our name, then obviously we're saying, no, we're including, women, like trans, intersex people, cross-dressers. Like we have, different lives spanning the whole spectrum.
Sure. Let's go back to that in a second, Eamonn. I just want to, for the younger people here, who are perhaps hearing about the Switchboard and they look at the website and all of that and it looks great. But when the Gay Switchboard, or whatever the service was called back in 1974, I'm suspecting, based on my experience and my knowledge, it was quite a controversial service. I mean, was it advertised, or what was the situation? How was it promoted? Was it through word of mouth? Because I suspect a lot of the newspapers wouldn't have carried it, and you may have been heard about it through notices on notice boards in Trinity or somewhere like that, or even the occasional bookshop, or a piece of paper handed out in certain circumstances.
Yeah, I'm actually not completely sure myself. I know that several publications or several newspapers wouldn't advertise the helpline because it mentioned homosexuality, which they did not want to endorse, even from the point of view of providing a helpline. So I'm actually not completely sure how it was promoted. I think the way you've described it sounds pretty accurate. It wasn't until the AIDS crisis in the 80s that, it really started to kind of gain a lot of attention, and maybe, it was seen as a very positive thing at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
fielding a huge number of calls during that period, and also letters. People used to write letters to tell a friend back in those days as well. So.
Yeah, no, I'll let you in on a secret here, Eamon. The reason why I asked that question is, well, I would have been maybe 22, thereabouts, which would have been the early 70s. I put on a jacket that, my father had this old sports coat, and I put on this jacket to go out. And I put my hand in the pocket and pulled out this piece of paper, and there was this small notice with a phone number. That was all it was, for the campaign for homosexual equality. And I thought, where has he got that from, and how's he got it, and why has he got it? So that's what I suspect is probably how people found out about certain things like that, which is, it shows you how far we have come in the meantime, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
But tell me now, you talked about, it's interesting, 2 points you've raised earlier, and I'm just, first of all, you talked about a drop in funding. Where does your funding come from? Is it all voluntary, or are you getting any support from the state or the city council at all?
No, we don't. We may have in the past. Again, there are areas of switchboard history that are slightly foggy. But like, for as long as, the members who've been there the longest, it's like in their living memory, we have never received funding from any government organization, or we haven't received grants, whatever. We relied completely on fundraising, and it would have been, like bingo nights in Panti Bar, something like this. That was where, like, we're completely voluntary. So
Sure.
To cover our running costs, that was how we did it. And then occasionally we would get, kind of some donations from small businesses.
Okay.
Something, I think Spar, like at one stage donated something to us. And the Dublin Bears, for example, used to fundraise
That's
for
correct.
us and that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah. Well, as although you're only a young man yourself, as more of us are getting older and older,
I'm
perhaps
getting older and older as well.
you're still only your brat, Eamon. Perhaps you might even appeal to some of the more mature members of the community to say, remember us in your will. Perhaps a bequest or something like that, because that would be a very honourable cause for it to go to, would it not? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's one of the ongoing issues, just like stability for the organization. Like, our running costs aren't that large compared to other organizations, but constantly needing to like find money. I'm sure a lot of organizations are in the same boat, but yeah, for stability going forward, funding is a huge issue, so we can focus on training new volunteers, and so our rent is paid,
of course,
like
absolutely.
all of this kind of stuff.
So what's your status? Are you a registered charity, or are you a not-for-profit? Because clearly you're not in it for profit.
We're a registered charity. We have a charitable tax exemption number.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
you were talking. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No. That's what I'm saying. You that way, perhaps people can donate to you and maybe even get some sort of tax break, I suppose. Is so it can be a win-win.
Yeah. And for anybody who just wants to make a donation, to help us out, there are links on our website.
Sure.
Like, it's just a PayPal me, whatever. But if you click on the button, it brings you to our PayPal me. And that's another very easy way to make a small donation. So.
Absolutely. Something you said, and I was a bit surprised, because that's not consistent with most of the other organisations that I've talked to. You were saying that during the pandemic, your caller numbers had dropped somewhat, whereas what I'm hearing from organisations like TENI, what I'm hearing from organisations like Belong To, theirs appears to have gone through the roof. What would you attribute that to?
Okay, but this was I qualify this. Outhouse was closed for a while, so we couldn't
Sure.
actually,
You couldn't
this
go
was
in.
part of the reason.
Okay.
We spent a few months completely closed. When we came back, we were doing 3 nights per week. So a lot of our, people who would regularly call us, I guess, were confused by what was really happening. Since we rebranded and since we relaunched, we're back 7 days per week since last November. We're now guaranteed to be there 365 days per year.
Very good.
Since then, since we've started offering dedicated nights on different areas, our call numbers have shot up. So we've been receiving, like 300% the amount of calls that we received pre-pandemic.
Okay. That would make sense. Yeah. You've also considerably revamped the website. It's actually visually it's very attractive now. It's very easy to follow. Was that done through volunteers, or was that another drain on your resources, Eamonn?
I actually do that myself.
Well, then you're to be congratulated. It's a fabulous piece of visual interface. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. It was my first time actually. It was just earlier this year, we were very low on resources, so everybody just had to pull together and try to, whatever talents that they had, just try and pull them in. So.
Yep. Let's just give the what we would call the meat and veg to people, and forgive for all those vegans out there. Your effective operational hours, am I correct in thinking here? Monday to Friday, it's 8:30 or 6:30 in the evening till 9 o'clock, and Saturdays and Sundays 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Are they the core, or are you available outside those as well?
That's the core. I guess simply because we're voluntary run, this is the maximum we can offer right now. We kind of hope to expand that in the future. At the moment, other than that, we also have email support. So you can write us an email, and we check those every day. So hopefully we can get back to people. Like we say, a maximum of 48 hours, but usually it would be 24 hours.
Okay.
We used to have a chat service as well, but we don't have that at the moment. Again, due to funding, because that costs quite a bit to maintain. So.
Sure, I understand that. The other side of the coin, at the moment, what's the situation in terms of volunteers? Can you always use more volunteers, or is there an upper limit on the number of volunteers you can sustain at any one time? Because obviously they would have to have a certain minimum level of knowledge to be a volunteer. Mm-hmm.
The training that we give is actually really comprehensive, and it's increased. When I did my training in 2018, I think we did 3 full days. Now, the training really takes about 6 full days, and then a few extra workshops on top of this. And then there is a 3-month mentoring period as well. So it takes a long time to actually get a volunteer to the point where they can take calls.
Sure. Yeah.
Earlier this year, we trained 10 new volunteers, and at the moment we're doing more training. So we have 16 new volunteers right now. So right now we have 37 members in total.
Okay.
That's the largest we've had since 2016, just shortly after the marriage equality referendum. So we're doing pretty well, and there's definitely an interest.
Yeah. If I have a look at, shall we say, the range of services you offer, and I'm really just thinking of this at this stage from a training and a volunteer perspective, Eamonn, there's a very wide range. Now, do you specialize in people, like, for instance, does somebody who may be very knowledgeable about, say, lesbian support, would they also be very knowledgeable about, say, substance abuse or alcohol abuse or something like that? Or do you specialize that people, you would have a volunteer for certain things on a certain night? How does that work out then, Eamonn?
I'll just say that we say substance use instead of substance abuse, just really sort of not to alienate people, I guess, because we have a kind of harm reduction approach to CAMS.
Of course,
whatever.
yeah.
Everybody receives the same training, but some people, will have from their own lived experience, will have, extra knowledge in a particular area. So we try as much as possible to have a woman doing the women's night.
Of course,
we try to have somebody from the trans intersex communities doing Friday nights, which are trans, intersex, non-binary night. So we try as much as possible so that people, and that's why we have the dedicated helplines.
Yeah.
So,
okay. Yeah, I understand. Now, the way your website lays it out is that while I am fairly confident in the sense that you would accept general queries every night of the week and on weekends. You've also got specific nights. Does that mean, for instance, Monday night you've got domestic abuse and domestic violence? If you get subject to domestic violence on a Tuesday night, does that mean you have to wait till the following Monday, or can you ring up and say, hello, I've just been subjected to what I think is domestic abuse half an hour ago? How does the situation work there, Eamonn?
Anybody can phone any day of the week. And we will definitely provide listening and support and signposting. But domestic abuse is one of the nights that's slightly different, however, because the people who do Mondays have received additional training.
Indeed,
as well. Because the issue of domestic abuse and domestic violence is extremely complex.
Indeed.
It's something, statistically, LGBTQIA plus people are much less likely to report it and talk about it than people in the general population. They're much less likely to call an organization, such as Men's Aid or Women's Aid, to talk about it as well. So we offer, the opportunity that they can talk to somebody from an LGBTQI plus background about this in a non-judgmental way, and we maybe have to refer them then to one of those organizations. But to answer your question short, the people on that night have received additional training, but certainly they can call any day of the week, and we will try and help them as much as possible.
Yeah. Is it shall we say, is it restricted to exclusively adults, Eamonn? Or what happens if somebody rings up who's 15 or thereabouts that would be clearly under the age of consent? What's the story there? If you were to get a call like that, would you have to refer them to somebody else, or could the switchboard handle it?
No, we can take calls from any age group with sensitivity and attention. We don't have any age limit. Like, we may end up referring them, to kind of other services. We would very rarely get calls from people, under the age of consent. We sometimes get emails, actually. So, yeah.
Okay, yeah. And is it always a situation that any call or any query, is the way I will put it, has to remain in-house? Or if somebody was, for argument's sake, I'm only being hypothetical here, Eamonn, if somebody rang up and said on a Monday night, I'm 14 years of age and I'm being subject to sexual abuse at home, my understanding is that the law obliges us to refer that on her. How does that, again, I'm just using it hypothetically, Eamonn, but how does the switchboard approach that from a policy perspective?
Well, from a policy perspective, we have to adhere to the legislation surrounding child safety and child first training. So our volunteers, have been trained in this. Like we have to tell the person first and foremost, that anything that you tell us, if it becomes clear that that's the direction going, like we have to tell them as soon as we can what the situation is, and that we're legally obliged, to report anything that they tell us. The same, also if somebody calls us and they are going to tell us about, it could be an adult and they're going to tell us that they were involved in abusing a child or something like this, we're obviously obliged to tell that person that the anonymity doesn't, in this particular situation, we can't, like, sort of, we're obliged to report anything that they tell us.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the legislation covering all organizations. So.
Yeah, that's what I would expect. Yeah. An interesting one, Eamonn. You mentioned that you approach any, shall we say, substance abuse, and some are legal, as we appreciate, and some aren't, etc., etc. That you would approach that from a harm reduction perspective, and that's to be commended. How would you? If it's one thing if it's the user ringing up, it's another thing if it's perhaps a parent, it's a partner, or whatever. I mean, the range of substances and the range of, shall we say, products that people are using these days, it's increasing exponentially almost by the year. You'd have to, would I be right in thinking you'd have to be keeping your volunteers trained up on a huge basis, or is it approached on a general basis that you can refer them to a more specialist organisation?
We do refer them to the National Drugs Treatment Centre if that's what they wish, or to Narcotics Anonymous in some circumstances. But often it never gets to that point. Chems and chemsex is an enormous problem.
That's what I'm hearing. Yeah.
Among the gay men in particular, part of the community. It's really an epidemic, to be honest. Some people can successfully deal with chems. They seem to be able to use chems to kind of like, enhance their sexual experience without it getting out of control. For other people, that's not possible, and the research indicates that it's so tied up with all kinds of different factors, like poor body image and self-esteem, like the desire to belong to a group, information technology and social media, hardcore pornography. All of these different things are kind of coming together, and then chems are thrown in on top. And it's just a cocktail, it's just, for many people, it's a disaster. Their lives are completely destroyed.
Yeah.
The approach that we take is the same approach as any other organization, working in the area, which is like harm reduction, because basically it's absolutely safest to not take chems at all. But if you're all and you have no intention of stopping taking chems, then you need to know the basic facts and you need to protect yourself, and you need to do it as safely as possible.
Yeah.
The main ones are like G, like Tina, they're probably the two most dangerous, and G is enormous on the gay scene, and it's also very dangerous because people may not know how to dose it properly, so there can be all kinds of serious complications from not taking it properly.
Sure, yeah.
So.
And of course, all of these are illegal. I mean, from my experience, one of the major side effects is coronary. You could well give yourself arrhythmia is quite common and whatever. But What about people? Would you send? And I don't want to labour this one too much, but would you send out a warning to people? Because I was just walking up a certain street in the city of Dublin the other day, and they had a shop. It wasn't an adult product shop. It was it was a standard shop, and there in the window, they were selling bottles of amyl, which most people would refer to as poppers. Now, in my experience, I mean, we've probably all done this, but in my experience, the effect on the heart over a long period of time has got to be a worry. But people are thinking, oh, that's legal, it must be okay. I mean, what I always say to people is there is no such thing as a safe drug, as enjoyable as they all can be. Is that the approach that the switchboard takes, Eamonn?
I guess like it does fall under that category. I guess poppers. I guess to be honest, like most of us kind of consider poppers to be almost benign, in the sense that there's such a huge part of gay culture and they've been around for so long. But as you said, some people can get into difficulty with them. Because it does open up your blood vessels. Your heart is pumping really, really fast. So, definitely. It's like if you have any kind of heart condition, you should not be taking poppers.
No.
But I think like the drugs of most concern, as I said, are really like crystal meth and GHB, GBL, which like G, they're the two that are like causing the most damage among gay men.
Yeah, well, I would have said, based on again anecdotal, Eamonn, that what we euphemistically refer to as the devil's dandruff is ubiquitous in Dublin now in a way that it wasn't 10 years ago, and that has been certainly known to cause shall we say? Yeah. Just very, very quickly, Eamonn, I just want to go through your various nights. Monday night, you've got you focus on domestic abuse and domestic violence, and I'm guessing that you've got specialists there. Then, as you mentioned, on Tuesday nights, you've got the women's night. Just very briefly, I gather that the lesbian line has closed down. Has this facility, shall we say, somewhat replaced that?
Like not replaced, as in we haven't taken over anything from.
Sure, no, I mean perhaps augmented.
But,
yeah.
But I guess because they're no longer offering a phone line service, so this is a space for women to call, women from any background, within the community or allies. And it's a space for anybody to call on Tuesdays from 6:30 to 9 p.m.
Yeah. And on Wednesdays you had what would have been, if you like, the core focus of the previous one. That's the men's night. That covers a whole range of topics there, Eamonn. If you just wanted to briefly just mention what is covered on that night.
So men's night, for like gay, bi, men who have sex with men, married men, and I think we also have there like kink and fetish community support, and signposting, and also asexuality. The married men, like we get a lot of calls from married men who are coming out, as kind of having same-sex attraction and are in difficulty. So just to mention that we also run a married men's group one night per month on the first Thursday of every month, which is a peer-led support group for men who are in there, who are leaving or are, well, they may be staying in, but an opposite sex relationship. They're coming to terms with same-sex attraction. So we used to run this in person, and obviously because of COVID, we now do it online. But I think this is very helpful for people to know that it exists.
Yeah. So. One of the reasons why I've asked that question, Eamonn, is because increasingly over the last, say, 3 months or so. I know I'm a Magnus and all of that, but I've been getting more and more. I've probably had half a dozen now requests on Facebook of people saying, I'm thinking of getting in touch with my LGBT side, etc., etc. What should I do? Now, I'm not really qualified in any professional sense of the word to advise people. Would it be okay to give them your phone number and just say Wednesday nights, talk to somebody? And I'm assuming that it's just not just a respectable version of Grindr that I'm getting. So if it was okay with you guys, I'd be very happy to refer them to the switchboard and get them to talk to somebody who is qualified.
Yeah, we get calls from all kinds of people in all kinds of situations, and some of them are very conversational.
Yeah.
Some people are just lonely, they just want to chat, and other people are exploring same-sex attraction, and that's what they need. They need just somebody to listen to them and to give them reassurance that this is all perfectly normal.
Yeah.
And often that's all they need. They may have been carrying this huge weight around on their shoulder, thinking that whatever is going on in their head is such a huge issue.
Sure.
And then once they tell somebody and they get a little bit of feedback saying, kind of like, even something like, we get many calls from people on this very same subject, and then suddenly the weight is gone, and they kind of realize it was just a big deal. For some people, like, sometimes it is a big deal, but in this day and age, in terms of like, coming out as LGBTQIA, there's so many supports, and like the community is so rich and diverse that it's a shame that people still have to carry a burden of shame, around their orientations.
Sure. And I think it's also important as well that people realize that LGBTQ, it's more than just the physical activity. There's an entire culture there now. There's an entire psychology there now, and I think it's very useful for somebody to talk to that rather than me say, "Oh, just go down to the panty bar on a Friday night." I think that's why it would be very helpful if I could refer people to you guys. Just moving on, Eamonn, we've talked about Thursdays, you do substance abuse, etc. Friday is trans and intersex. Now, again, I've got a background in working with Tenny on this one. Is that something that you would generally take on board, or would you essentially be referring people to a more specialist organisation like Tenny?
We get some of our training from Tenny. And, they very generously, anytime we're running training for new volunteers, we'll have one of them, will come along and give us an intensive training session.
Sure.
But yeah, like, we can only take the call so far, and then maybe what the person needs is additional specialist, support. And in this case, Tenny are the people, obviously, who we would refer people to. So, yeah.
Yeah. And on Saturdays, you've got mental health. Now, that's a very complex subject, so I'm not going to spend too much on that. But as you've mentioned, whatever your query is, you're entitled to ring up any time and speak to somebody who will at least give you an ear and take on board what your concerns or what your interests or maybe your questions are. Now, Eamonn, I gather, and this is something we want to get out there to people in sufficient time, you're having a bit of a fundraiser coming up. I think is it a quiz? Tell us about that, and tell us about how people can get involved and support it.
Okay. Like, traditionally, once a year, we would have had a big fundraiser.
Yeah.
Possibly somewhere like Panti Bar. So this year, Panti has very, very kindly and generously agreed to host the night for us. We couldn't do it in Panti Bar because, we don't know when.
Yeah, look, COVID is playing havoc with everything.
Yeah, so we're doing it through Zoom. So we did one earlier in the year, wasn't hosted by Panti, but it was hosted by John Brown from Leathermen of Ireland, who is very generously writing the quiz for this one as well. And from Cathal Mulvaney from Leathermen of Ireland as well. He's doing the bingo, which is ABBA themed. So the whole night is ABBA themed. So it should be great fun. We'll have lots of prizes. We'll have lots of spot prizes. People can enter in teams of 5, and it's €50 for a team of 5. And all of the proceeds will go to the switchboard. Yeah, and if people are interested, they should just drop us an email at contact@TheSwitchboard.ie.
Contact, yep.
We will then send, an information sheet on how to register your team and whatever.
Sure.
The last one that we ran on Zoom, we had over 100 people there. It was really great. Like, people are sick of Zoom, but I really feel that this event, and with music as well, is actually quite a different kind of a beast. So it's on Friday, the 3rd of September at 8 o'clock, and everybody is welcome to come along. And if you're by yourself, if you can't get a team of 5, still come along, and we can assign people to teams on the night.
Yeah. No, it sounds like it's all about playing the game, not whether you win or lose, and I think that's that's an honourable thing. Just in conclusion, Eamonn, can you read out the switchboard number for people so they will know? Anybody listening to this, they will be able to know where to contact, and then they can go to your website as well. So if you could do that and just let them know what the website is also.
Sure. So 7 days a week, Monday to Friday, 6:30 p.m. to 9 p.m, Saturday and Sunday, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. So it's 018721055.
8721055. Okay, you might need to change that on your website.
What we have. Did I say it wrong?
Well, no. What you've got on your website is 5253113. So do you have a second number?
This was an experiment because we had a cross-dressing trans-spectrum helpline on Sunday. We were trying to funnel calls to that. It wasn't really working, so we're going back. In the next couple of weeks, we'll be going back just to our old number all of the time.
Is that's the 872 number, is it?
That's the 018721055.
That's fine. Yeah, well then I'll put that out. Eamonn Reddington. And
the website.
Your website, sorry, yes.
Yeah. So it's www.TheSwitchboard.ie /
Yeah, and for those of the vintage variety like myself, it's still the same great service that used to be the Gay Switchboard, with just some extra services now. So, Eamonn Reddington, it's been very informative and a delight to talk to you. Keep up the good work, and we'll hopefully be able to participate in the quiz and the fun evening on the 3rd of September. So, Eamonn,
excellent.
Thank you to all our friends at the Switchboard.
Thank you very much, Mick.
Yep.
Okay. Be good.
Okay.
Friends of Dorothy come out off the sidewalk and onto the street to the sound of those legendary feet. When there's no place like home, anti-him, anti-establishment. With the chaff and the short straw, they'll have a step for sure. Anti-M, I'm anti-establishment. They took my name and the clothes I own. They broke our hearts, but not our souls.